Hello, everyone. Welcome to a Lacey Presbyterian Church interview with one of Lacey's mission partners, the Hagar Community Church leaders. I have with me today Lane Brubaker, who's going to introduce herself now, and then she'll introduce her colleague, Riley.
Hi, everybody. I am Reverend Lane Brubaker. I am the pastor of Hagar's Community Church, which is a congregation planted on the inside of the Washington Correction Center for Women. Coming up in October, I'll have been about this work for 2 years. Time has flown by. I can't believe I've been doing this for that long. I moved here in 2018 from New Orleans, and I'm so excited to be the pastor of Hagar's Community Church. And my brand new colleague in ministry, she just started this month, is Reverend Riley Pickett, but I'll let her introduce herself.
Hey, y'all. So it is my, I guess, third day on the job. I just started at Hagar's this past weekend and got to Skype into some services and introduce myself. And so I'll be focusing mainly on reentry because of coronavirus. I'm not able to enter into the prison. So it turned out to be a big blessing because now I can communicate with the women once they leave because I'm not held back by Department of Corrections baggage in that way. So I'm really excited to start figuring out how to build a reentry program and start planning out how churches like you can get involved in reentry.
Terrific. Well, thanks, Lane and Riley, for joining me for this interview. It's always fun to hang out with fellow pastors from the Presbytery. So my first question to each of you is, and we'll start with Riley this time, what drew you to this work with Hagar Community Church?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say there's kind of two different pieces to that. And one of the pieces is that I've known Lane for a while now. She was actually my site coordinator in the young adult volunteer program in New Orleans, which I did a couple years after graduating from college. And I got to do that and get to know Lane and her husband Crawford. And I actually worked at their church plant called Okra Abbey, which was church in a community garden in New Orleans. And so kind of my love for worshiping communities and non-traditional places started there. And so I learned about the opening at Hagar's through Lane, and I've been watching her work there and have just been excited by what's happening inside the WCCW for a while now. And so I kind of just jumped at the opportunity to get involved and be a part of the movement that's happening there.
Awesome. Lane, how about you?
Yeah, so when I was living in New Orleans and I had a stirring in my spirit that it was about time to start seeing what else was out there, feeling called to move on to other things. And part of my discernment work was looking at job opportunities. And I came across one that was in the church leadership connection that said, start a church on the inside of a women's prison. And tells you something about myself, because when I found that job description, my heart leapt. It was like, this is the call. Like everything on this list is things I would be excited and happy to do. And I felt like it was a perfect combination of things that I had been prepared to, in my past, to come here and to offer. And so in New Orleans, I was part of a church plant there that was called the Okra Abbey. My husband and I were founders of a worshiping community and a non-traditional worshiping space. And so part of my identity as in my call is that I'm a church planter, and I believe I am called to start worshiping communities and non-traditional spaces and to point the traditional congregations and traditional church to see the ways in which God's Spirit is at work in places that we don't necessarily imagine God's Spirit to be. So maybe that's in a community garden in a high needs neighborhood in New Orleans, or maybe that's inside a prison. But it is my witness and testimony that God's Spirit is very much present there, and that I encountered Jesus. I don't bring Jesus to these places, I encounter Jesus in these places, and I am transformed by the Christ that I encounter there.
That's awesome. Thanks both of you for sharing about your sense call to this wonderful ministry. Lane, would you briefly describe what the initiative 1001 Worshiping Communities is, and how Hagar's Community Church fits into that?
Absolutely. So 1001 is a office of the Presbyterian Church USA, the Presbyterian mission offices. And several years ago at a General Assembly, a motion was made on the floor of General Assembly to start 1001 new worshiping communities. I think at the time was within the next 10 years. And so the church has been about that work, doing, helping folks imagine how to do church maybe a little differently in different spaces. And the church supports that financially, and then also through like education and assessments and coaching and all of that sort of thing. And so Hagar's Community Church is considered one of those 1001 churches that the Presbyterian Church is starting.
Awesome. Wow, we have one of them right here in the Olympia Presbytery. That's so cool.
We actually have several, actually, in our presbytery.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
We're overachievers.
Totally.
Awesome. Very cool. Okay, well, this is what we're talking about today. Okay. Hey, Riley, I have a question for you now. You mentioned that you are serving in the area of reentry. Can you describe what that is and what that looks like for someone to leave prison and to reenter?
Yeah, totally. So I can't tell you any firsthand accounts just yet with people that I actually know. I've just read books and heard about it because I just started. But from what I have understood, reentry is the process of being released from prison and reintegrating back into society again, which can be really difficult because you haven't been in that world for a while. You've been in this other microcosm of a world. And it can be really difficult for people to reintegrate back into society because the prison industrial system makes it hard, I think, for people to reintegrate, placing a lot of restrictions on what they're able to do. And it can be hard to find a job because of, people's attitudes about incarcerated people, and because there can be policies at certain places where they don't hire people that have been formerly incarcerated. So, jobs, housing, just like mental health, it can be really hard to reintegrate back into society. And so I'm hoping to offer a lot of pastoral care and to kind of accompany them alongside as they figure that out, and also connect them to communities like yours, where they can find a spiritual community, because they would have left Hagar's, and so they're probably seeking that spiritual community.
Wonderful. That is great. Thank you for moving here to help with that. That is a really important aspect of a way that churches can help people who are really in need in our community. So thank you for that. Lane, next question is for you. Can you describe briefly what a day in the life of Pastor Lane Brubaker looks like?
Sure. So I would say that I think my life as the pastor of Hagar's Community Church is actually much more similar to a typical pastor's life than what most people would assume. I have a diverse congregation with a lot of needs, and so part of my time at the WCCW is going to people's living units and sitting down with them and talking and doing pastoral care and support. And then the rest of my time is planning worship services, coordinating those worship services, getting feedback from my congregation about what they want in worship, and incorporating that back into what's going on. So yeah, I think it's a really fun. I was telling someone this weekend, I hadn't got good sleep, and I was kind of grumpy, going into service. And when my congregation got there for worship, my mood was just immediately lifted, because I have the privilege of working with a congregation that I just love so much, and they're so welcoming and loving and gracious that they just feed my spirit so much. So yeah, that's kind of my day, is just getting to be with these women who I find a lot of privilege in getting to be with, because they're cut off from so many people. And then I get to encounter the gospel with them, and it's a really wonderful experience.
That's awesome. Very cool. Okay, well, The Mission and Evangelism Committee at Lacey Presbyterian Church was eager to ask both of you, what are some of the ways that a church like Lacey could become more aware of this ministry, possibly become involved in some way? How might we pray for you and support the work that you're doing?
Yeah. So currently, because of COVID-19, outside visitors are not allowed to come into the prison right now. They're being very strict about who's coming in. And also, probably the biggest prayer request right now for the WCCW is to be safe from COVID-19. As we've watched in the news, a prison population is incredibly vulnerable to COVID-19. And last week, the prison did have its first 2 positive diagnoses. And so you can imagine that that's created a lot of stress and worry for the folks who are incarcerated there. And so, you know, my prayer is that we are able to isolate those cases, that those 2 women, you know, are healthy soon and that it doesn't spread to any more folks. So that's the biggest prayer request right now, is that just that we can all be safe from COVID-19. Another way that you can support and during this time is every Saturday evening at 5 o'clock, we have a Zoom prayer vigil. It's about 15 to 20 minutes long. We gather via Zoom. We offer prayers of the people. We light candles for all the different prayer requests that people have. And I lift up prayers from Hagar's Community Church. I also give announcements about what's going on. I keep people posted on what's happening in the prison and what people can, and then different things arise over time that people can offer or participate in. Like an example, we did a video benediction that I brought into the prison. And so lots of people that were attending the prayer vigil shot a video of themselves, and I put it all together, and it was actually a really joyful thing to get to share with the women on the inside. So that's an example of ways you could participate. And then I'm gonna let Riley talk about the reentry side of participation.
Yeah, totally. I wanted to second what Lane said about the prayer vigil and mention that I don't know the best way that you would want people to find the link, but I always find the link on the Hagar's Community Church website, and it's on the home page of the website. So it's a really easy thing to find. Yeah, in terms of reentry, I'm kind of at the beginning of building something that hasn't existed before. So I'm kind of brainstorming what that could look like for churches to be involved there. And that's definitely something I'll be reaching out to you about, opportunities for y'all to learn more and be involved. But I would say just initially, a really important thing is to be educating ourselves on stereotypes and myths about people who are incarcerated, because kind of the mindset that I've shifted to is not so much helping people who have been incarcerated, while that is needed, but also recognizing, not just like letting them in, but like recognizing that they have gifts to offer, special gifts, because they see from a certain vantage point as someone who's been othered by society and as a marginalized person being incarcerated, they offer gifts because they can see from a place that we can't see. And so just like learning, you know, what gifts they have to offer and being open to welcoming them into our communities. Yeah.
And then the third way, oh God.
No, you go ahead. That's right. There's a third way. Let's talk about that next. And then tell us about that. Then tell us about that cool sign behind your head.
Okay, absolutely.
It's really
absolutely.
beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, the third way that we can participate with Hagar's Community Church is financial mission partnership. Hagar's Community Church will never be a congregation that can sustain itself the way a traditional congregation can. The average person who is incarcerated makes 42 cents an hour. And then it's also illegal for them to support a ministry that's on the inside. They can't actually pay for a program that's on the inside. So therefore, we have to always have congregation mission partners. And so you guys are already a mission partner, and I'm deeply thankful for that. And so just a continuation of that partnership would be super helpful in a lot of ways. And then the sign behind me, we actually made this in Hagar's worship service on the third Saturday of January. because that was our first anniversary as a worshiping community when we officially started. And on the strips of cloth are names and prayers for Hagar's community church that we put together, and it says Hagar on it. So when we were having weekly worship service all together as one body, this would always be draped over the communion table, which communion was a big part of our worship service. Currently during COVID, communion's not quite allowed. It doesn't help with social distancing, but someday I imagine we will be back in our chapel services as one body with our banner hanging over the communion table.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for telling us about that. I really appreciate it. And I think it highlights for us the importance of really knowing who is Hagar? What is her story? How do we get to know her through scripture? And the Lacey congregation, you all are in for a big treat this coming Sunday, August 9th. Lane is our guest preacher, and she'll be preaching from the Genesis story of Hagar and helping us to understand who she is and what her life has to say to us. And it's a really important story, not only just to be biblically literate, of course, we need to know these things, but even more importantly, I believe each of us can find ourselves in her story in some way. And as we get to know this ministry better and find ways for us as a congregation to be involved in praying and in practical ways like giving financially, may we embrace this story of Hagar and come to understand how important she is to God's story of loving us, the whole human family, really well. So everyone, blessings on the week ahead. Enjoy your time with Lane in the live worship service on Sunday. I'm taking a few days off to have some vacation days with my family. I'm really grateful to Lane for stepping in and preaching this Sunday. And I look forward to more storytelling done like this through interviews with ministry partners. And I'm already looking forward to welcoming Lane back sometime, probably in the new year, to continue to help us understand this unique area of ministry that God is calling the people of Olympia Presbytery to be a part of. So blessings on the rest of your day. Thanks for joining in this interview, and we'll hope to see you all soon, somehow on Zoom. Bye-bye. Bye, guys. Thanks.